Welcome, welcome. We are doing Bible study starting on the book of Haggai. Haggai? Is that what you said, Jerry?
Yeah.
Haggai?
Close
Haggai
enough.
tonight. Close enough. Haggai, close enough. Haggai tonight. This is a very interesting book. It's just got a couple of chapters, and we're going to go ahead and do a little bit of background on this book, and then we're going to get started in chapter 1. All right. Does anybody know anything about the background of this book? What do you know about Haggai? Have you ever studied it? Has anybody ever preached a sermon on it? Do tell.
No, never heard of a preaching on it.
I never have either. There are a lot of books that I've never heard of preaching on, ever. Yeah. And this is one. But this is a very interesting book because you see here some very particular set dates in this book. It has a really kind of a detailed timeline to it. It's probably the most detailed timeline I've seen in the Bible. You know, some things were like, it was kind of in such and such a period of time, this king and no, and all of those kinds of things. But this one's pretty precise as far as the time goes. It's the second shortest book in the Old Testament. So we're not going to be in it for long unless we sort of decide to expand our study a little bit, because there are some references in some other books to this one, or rather in this book to some other books, and it kind of intermingles a few of the other minor prophets in here as well, because we're talking about this particular period of time. So we're going to be in Haggai chapter 1, Haggai chapter 1, Haggai. Say it again, Jerry.
Just Haggai.
Haggai, okay. So that's close. All right. So we're going to look at this from a historical perspective first. So let me do a little bit of screen sharing here with you. And I think that's what I want to share. Okay. Are you guys seeing the word Haggai?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. All right. First of all, I thought that looks cute. Okay. So here's what we have. All right. This is the book. It's only 2 chapters, and they're not very long chapters. The first chapter is only 15 verses. The second one's only 23. But look at all of this action that happens as we talk about this book. You have a challenge to the people, a response to the challenge, then you have this sort of emotional bit of scripture, the appeal and the explanation, and then the revelation of God's program and the future. A lot of stuff is packed into these 2 chapters. So Haggai is going to take place right here at around 520 BC. So we see this captivity, the 70-year captivity. This is when the Babylonians had come in and taken, the Jews captive, okay? And they held them in captivity for 70 years. And then Cyrus said, you know what? You guys can leave and go back to Israel. So we see that that's around, right in there, about 20 years earlier. It's about 539 that happens. So then we see that Haggai is written around 520. So we're seeing this temple rebuilt situation. Haggai has a lot to do with the rebuilding of that temple. Okay, so let's get back here. All right, so we'll start in verse 1. First of all, Haggai means festival, and it could very possibly be derived from the Hebrew verb Haggag, meaning to celebrate. Now, this is a neat chapter because there's a lot about the temple in here. You know, we hear all of this stuff about how the temple looked and how they built it and all David and all the things, but this is very pivotal in the rebuilding of the temple after all of this mess has happened. All right, start in verse 1. Who will be my reader tonight?
It's up to you.
Jerry, do you want to read? You said. Yeah,
I'll read.
If you're the one that gets chosen. It's kind of how it works. Yeah. Let's do verses 1 through 5.
Okay. Oh, just as a sideline, this is actually the first time since the Exodus, not Exodus, the reinstatement of Israel after Cyrus he was the first prophet to speak after that time.
Yes.
So he was the first one when they came back.
Yep.
In the second year of Darius the king, on the first day of the 6th month, the following word of Adonai came through Haggai the prophet to Zerubbabel, the son of Shealtiel, the governor of Judah, and to Yeshua, the son of Hatzadek. Now this I have no idea. Kohen Haggadol. Here is what Adonai Sabaoth says. This people say that now isn't the time. The time hasn't yet arrived for Adonai's house to be rebuilt.
Mm-hmm.
Then this word of Adonai came through Haggai the prophet. So is now the time for you to be living in your own paneled houses while this house lies in ruin? Therefore, here is what Adonai Sabaoth says. Think about your life.
Mm-mm-mm. Well, we got some stuff happening in here.
All of a sudden.
I'm telling you, this is so crazy to me. So it's the second year of Darius the king. So there's a piece of the timeline right there. And we know that Darius, when he ruled, we know pretty much almost the exact period of time that he was ruling. So that's where we get this timeline. And then it's in the 6th month. That's very, very precise. And as I recall, it seems like in Daniel, there's also some pretty precise time, but this one is like nutshell time, like very precise. In the first day of the month came the word of the Lord by Haggai the prophet to Zerubbabel, the son of Shealtiel. We all know Zerubbabel. We've heard about him. We know that he's the son of Shealtiel, the governor of Judah. And to Joshua, now that was interesting to me, the son of Josedek, the high priest. So the high priest's kid is part of this whole scenario. Why is, and I thought, why? Why is he part of this? Why is he mentioned? Everybody that's mentioned has a purpose, okay? And I was trying to figure out what the purpose of Joshua was. Any thoughts on that?
Other than being he was the high priest's son, he was the next in line for the high priesthood.
Right. So this is almost like we're going to do this. This is a future thing. We're talking about building the temple in the future. So the high priest at the time may not have been the one to be in position to be the priest at the time the temple was built, because we know that the priesthood went down through the family, generally passed down through the family. Mm-hmm. So I wondered if this was going to be the guy when the temple was built. Maybe Joshua was going to be the priest at that time. So that's why it was important to mention. Thus speaketh the Lord of hosts, saying, this people, say the time is not come, the time that the Lord's house should be built. Now, when Jesus refers, or when God refers to his children, he says, my people. Everybody, we're aware of that. If my people, my people, my people. He says, this people, in this case. And that stuck out to me, and I thought, methinks he is not very pleased at this moment. You know what I mean? When I'm talking to Noel, all right, honey, you go do so-and-so, that's when I'm in loving mode. But when I'm not happy with Noel, Janae, all good, right? I call her by her full name. I don't call her honey or sweetie or baby. You know, I call her by her full name. And that's almost what this feels like to me. You know, he's not saying my people, he's saying this people. And it's like, you're like, you know what? This girl has been getting on my last nerve. Y'all know what I'm talking about? That whole sort of attitude. And I thought that's a very unique way of calling attention to something. He says, this people. The time has not come, the time that the Lord's house should be built. Verse 3. So it's not time yet for the Lord's house to be built. Then came
that's what the people are saying.
That's what they're saying, yes. Yes. Thus speaketh the Lord of hosts, saying, the people say, this people say, it's not time to build a house. And then the Lord's like, then came the word of the Lord by Haggai the prophet, saying, is it time for you, O you to dwell in sealed houses? Now, sealed houses, has kind of a couple of meanings. See, it kind of means a covering, but it also means very expensive wood that was used as panels on walls.
Cedar.
So when he says sealed houses and this house to lie waste, he said, y'all are over here living in the lap of luxury and you have yet to rebuild my temple. He's like, priorities, people. He is pointing out what they have not done. They're over here living a wonderful, lavish lifestyle that has been provided to them by God and haven't rebuilt his house. So you kind of feel this coming on. You sort of get this idea of how God is feeling toward his people right at this moment. I'm going to tell you, we get aggravated. Okay. Is that a real emotion? Real feeling? We get aggravated. I think God's a little bit aggravated right here. Do you feel that?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay. All right. Let's read from 6 down just to verse 7. Let's read 6 and 7.
You sow much, but bring in little.
Uh-oh.
You eat, but aren't satisfied. You drink, but never have enough. You clothe yourselves, but no one is warm. And he who works for a living earns wages that are put into a bag full of holes.
Mm-hmm.
Here is what Adonai says. Think about your life. Go up into the hills, get wood, and rebuild a house. I will be pleased with that. Then I will be glorified, says Adonai.
Okay. So now we see, all right, so at the end of verse 5 is the phrase, consider your ways in the King James.
Yes.
Then we see it again at the end of verse 7, consider your ways. Hold on to that thought. Verse 6, you've sown a lot, but you bring in little. You eat, but you don't have enough. You drink, but you're not filled with drink. You don't have enough. You clothe yourselves, but nobody's warm. You don't have enough. And whoever's earning wages, you're put into a bag with holes, which means at the end of the day, you don't have enough. What is the thought behind this particular verse? What is God saying here?
There's a reason for your destitution. You were sent here, I think it was Zerubbabel brought them. You were sent here for a purpose. That's what the king said. Build the temple. You come back and you build yourself your luxurious homes or your sealed houses, and still my temple, my house, lies bare, empty, and torn down. God's not happy. You were sent for a purpose, and you have totally turned your back on it.
Uh-huh.
That's just a simple way of putting it.
Yep. And that is the bottom line. He is literally pointing out, listen, you guys are doing stuff here. You think you should be prospering, but you're not. And he's going to explain the reason why. Thus saith the Lord of hosts, verse 7, consider your ways. Think about it. Why are you earning wages, but you don't seem to ever have any money? Why is it that you bring all this food in and you eat, but you don't have enough for the next day? Think about it. Why is that? Verse 8, go up to the mountain and bring wood and build the house, and I will take pleasure in it, and I will be glorified, saith the Lord. He literally gives them a command. He doesn't say it's a good idea if you would run on up to the mountain. He says, go. We see go a few times in the word where he's giving a command. It is set in stone. There is no wishy-washiness with that word. When he says go, you go. Bottom line. He's saying, go and do this thing. Go get the wood, build the temple, and I will take pleasure in it. He says, if you build that temple, I'll be good, and then we can make some progress, some forward steps here. I want to read to you from verses 1 through 8 in the Message. On the first day of the 6th month of the 2nd year in the reign of King Darius of Persia, God's message was delivered by the prophet Haggai to the governor of Judah, Zerubbabel, son of Shealtiel, and to the high priest, Joshua, son of Jehozadak. A message from God of the angel armies. The people procrastinate. They say this isn't the right time to rebuild my temple, the temple of God. Shortly after that, God said more, and Haggai spoke it. How is it that it's the right time for you to live in your fine new homes while the home, God's temple, is in ruins? And then a little later, God of the angel armies spoke out again. Take a good, hard look at your life. Think it over. You've spent a lot of money, but you haven't much to show for it. You keep filling your plates, but you never get filled up. You keep drinking and drinking and drinking, but you're always thirsty. You don't have enough. You put on layer after layer of clothes, but you can't get warm. And the people who work for you, what are they getting out of it? Not much. A leaky, rusted out bucket. That's what. That's why, I know, that's why God of the angel army said, take a good hard look at your life. Think it over. Then God said, here's what I want you to do. Climb into the hills, cut some timber, bring it down, and rebuild the temple. Do it just for me. Honor me. I love the way the message, it's such easy reading, and it really kind of gives you that whoa perspective. I love the way it says that. But goodness gracious, how often do we do this very same thing? You know, we'll go on, you know, we'll do all kinds of things during the week. We're busy. And I'm not saying us in general. We love to come to church. And then you're so busy during the week and you take your Saturday and you go do whatever you want to do. And then you're too tired to come to church on Sunday. We neglect the house of the Lord in that way. You know what I mean? That's sort of the culture that we're living in. It's just kind of, you know, it's okay to go to a football game on Sunday, but not necessarily okay to go to church. I'm too tired for that, but I'll go to a football game. There are all kinds of ways that we take this sort of the temple is where God dwells, but us coming together and him being in the midst of us and doing that, this is our temple. This is where God dwells, where we see him together as a family on Sundays. You know, they didn't want to even build the temple. They didn't want the place. They had to have a physical structure for him. Whereas our gathering brings him into our midst. But they didn't even want to do that. It's amazing to me that they would think of themselves first. But of course, we know these children keep all along the way acting like crazies, all along the way. Let's start at verse 9 and go down to, let's see, where's my verse 11.
You looked for much, but it came to little. And when you brought it home, I blew it away. Why? Asked Adonai. Because my house lies in ruins, while every one of you runs to take care of his own house. This is why the sky above you has withheld the dew, so that there is none, and the land withholds its fruit. In fact, I called for a drought on the land and on the hills, on the grain, the wine, and the olive oil, on what ground brings up, on men, animals, and all that hands produce. There we go.
Yep. Okay.
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. So you looked for much and came to nothing. Well, let me tell you, there's times that I thought I was going to do great and it was nothing. Y'all know what I'm talking about? You know, this is going to be so wonderful. It's going to be so awesome. And it comes to nothing. We've all had that experience. Okay. When you brought it home, you blew it away. In other words, because you did not rebuild the temple, because that was not a priority to you, none of the stuff you were doing was a priority to me. So the little that you got didn't matter much to me. I blew it away. It didn't mean anything to me. That's what it feels like he's saying here. Am I right or wrong in that? What's your interpretation of that? Verse 9. Why? Says the Lord of hosts, because my house is waste. And you keep going to your place and mine's laying in ruins.
I'll pay my tithes when I can afford it.
Yeah. You
Yeah,
can't afford
I want to give a love offering to the pastor or to whoever, but man, right now I've got to go shopping, or I need
Yeah.
something on the car or whatever. We seem to be always allowing anything that's out of our commitment that can come in and just take our thoughts, our ideas, and our dreams away from us. We allow that to happen.
I agree with that. I agree with that. And we seem to think that we can do everything on our own, like we don't need God. This is what's happening here. When they did not build the temple, they were saying, we don't need you, God.
Exactly.
Because he had to have that physical dwelling place. That was super important back then. It was urgent, critical that he have that, because that's how they accessed him. Okay. If they were not accessing him through a prophet, they were going into the temple to do what? Make their sacrifices, right? So they were accessing God through the high priest. So they're basically saying that stuff is not necessary. I'm just going to go over here in my house and my nice walls made of cedar, expensive cedar or expensive olive, whatever kind of wood they had that was super expensive. I'm going to live in the lap of luxury, and God can just be sort of out there somewhere. He doesn't, I don't need him. It's okay. And I cannot imagine telling God that I don't need him.
Well, that's interesting about this. It wasn't, now this is my opinion, okay, just mine. It wasn't so much about the temple, the blocks, the bricks, the stone. It was about the obedience. They were brought back for a reason, and they committed themselves to that reason. That's why they spent 6 months going across the desert. So they came back to build the temple. And the first thing they do is they just turn their back totally on the obedience level of what they're supposed to be doing. They just said, God can wait. We know he's a patient God. We know that. But at this point, it's their obedience is causing God to really get rankled at them.
Obedience is better than sacrifice.
Exactly.
I have that actually in my notes. So,
sorry.
No, you're good. You're good. We're going to get there. Okay, so I agree with you. I think it's about their obedience more than anything. But it's in order to build the temple, they had to make personal sacrifices to do it.
Yes.
But rather than making those personal sacrifices for the temple, they chose to do everything for themselves. That's what it's all about. All right. Verse 10. Therefore, the heaven over you is stayed from dew. So you're not going to have any watering on your crops. And okay, so this, I want somebody to explain this to me because I don't quite understand it and I didn't have a chance to research it. I know that before the flood, okay, dew covered the earth, right? And that's how the plants were watered. Rain came with the flood that covered the earth, right? So in this instance, what are we talking about?
As I understand it, God, when the curse came on the people because of their what they were doing, and he called on Noah to build the ark. After the waters of the deep split open, and after the heavy dew that was around the earth collapsed onto the earth, that all this water was sent, and God, this is my understanding, God then took what was natural back then with the heavy dew and the moisture coming up, and replaced that with the science we know of climatology, of the rain, the clouds, the evaporation, all that took place, but it wasn't working like that beforehand. But it worked like that, and what that happened was how that helped God is that he could hold that back. He could hold that process back from actually working when the people were not obeying him. He had that as one of those, how do you want to say it, disciplinary procedures. He could hold back the normal process of the weather and the rain and everything.
So he basically said, not going to water your crops. Everything's going to die. And the earth is stayed from her fruit. So everything's going to perish.
Right.
Basically, he's saying it's this important. It's so important that I have to wake you up by not even allowing you to eat. Because think about it. If you don't have wheat for your cattle, you don't have anything for your animals to eat, what's going to happen to your animals? They're going to die. Same deal.
Right.
So that one thing completely takes away the meal, food. That's incredible to me. But he had to go to that extreme because these people were like, it's not a big deal. Seriously, not a big deal. It's always a big deal. All right. Verse 11, and I called for a drought upon the land and on the mountains and on the corn and the new wine and the oil and that which the ground bringeth forth, anything that the ground produces, and men and cattle and all the labor of the hands. Everything went to nothing. Everything.
Yeah.
Let me tell you something. It's a hard life to live when everything you touch turns to dust.
Mm.
King Midas thought everything was great. I'm going to touch everything I touch is going to be gold until he touched a kid, his family, and it turned to gold. He thought everything was going to be great. When everything turns to dust, I don't want to live that kind of life. I know I'm going to have some failure in life. It's part of how we learn, part of how we grow. We try something and it fails, we try something else. But if everything I touched every time failed, I cannot imagine the level of anxiety, the level of stress, the level of depression, all of these things coming about because of my choice to not be obedient or build the temple. Okay, that I simply cannot picture that, but that's what the word says. Can you imagine living in a society where it's not just you that's happening to? It's everybody and everything. There are no exceptions to this rule right here.
Yeah.
All right, let's keep reading. Let's go ahead and read through the end.
Then Zerubbabel, the son of Shealtiel, and Joshua, the son of Ahazedek, the high priest, with all the rest of the people, paid attention to what Adonai their God had said, and to the words of Haggai the prophet, since Adonai their God had sent him, and the people were filled with fear in the presence of Adonai. Haggai, the messenger of Adonai, conveyed this message of Adonai to the people. I am with you, says Adonai. Adonai roused the spirit of Zerubbabel, the son of Shealtiel, the governor of Judah, and the spirit of Joshua, the son of Ahazedek, the high priest, and the spirits of all the rest of the people, so that they came and began to work on the house of Adonai. Oh boy, Adonai, their God. This was the 24th day of the 6th month of the 2nd year of Darius the king.
All right. So basically, we see the same people from our very first verse. Hey, Kim, from our first verse, we hear Zerubbabel, son of Shealtiel, and Joshua, the son of Josedek, the high priest, with all of the remnant of the people. We see remnant in this chapter twice in the King James Version, but we know that the remnant, when the Babylonian detention, the captivity happened, and Cyrus said, you guys go back to Israel. Some of the Israelites stayed in Babylon, okay? Some of them went other places. That's called the diaspora, where they went to settle in other places. Some of them went back home. So this group that had gone back home obeyed the voice of the Lord their God. Finally, after all of this has happened, they're finally like, oh, you know what? We should build that temple. And they obeyed the voice of the Lord their God, having been spoken through Haggai the prophet, as the Lord their God had sent him, and the people did fear before the Lord. Now, fear, this particular fear, I think it was multiple kinds of fear. I think it was fear of God, the awesomeness of God, that kind of godly fear, but I think they were scared. This is a God that has taken away every productivity kind of thing they can do, everything. He's taking it all away. I'd be scared of that God because he could take away my ability to breathe, much less anything else. So I think there's a fear, not just of the awesomeness of God, but there's a fear that, you know, they're a little bit scared, I would say. Wouldn't you? Would you be scared in this situation?
Mm-hmm. Well, if I had an attitude like they did, yes, I'd be scared to death.
Oh, yeah, literally to death. To death. Okay. And I think it's multiple kinds of fear. Then Haggai, the Lord's messenger, in the Lord's message. Now, if you look at that in the King James, it says, then spake, verse 13, Haggai, the Lord's messenger, in the Lord's message. So he's repeating that. That means pay attention. This is the real deal. I am with you, saith the Lord.
Yes.
So even in all that mess, he is letting them know, listen, I'm here. He's their comfort. He's their guide. He's their God. And he's saying to them, even with all of this that you've done, you know, you've hurt my feelings, people, but I'm still here. I'm with you. I was upset, but I'm still here. I wasn't happy with you, but I'm still here. This is the God that we serve. When we mess up, when we get angry at God, it doesn't change his faithfulness to us. He is still there. And that part right there just blessed my socks off. I thought, I am such a failure in so many things, but God doesn't see me that way. He sees me as my potential. What can I do? What will I do? And he chooses to be with me, even in my failure, so that I can have success. Because it takes someone that's pushing you past your failures and encouraging you when you're discouraged to help you get past that moment. You got to have those people in your corner. Encourage yourself. I know the word says that, but sometimes it's hard to do that. It really is. Any disagreement with that?
Yes, agree.
100%. Verse 14, and the Lord stirred up the spirit of Zerubbabel, the son of Shealtiel, governor of Judah, and the spirit of Joshua, the son of Josedek, the high priest, and the spirit of all the remnant of the people. And they came and did work in the house of the Lord of hosts, their God. So he stirred up their spirits. What does that sound like to you? What does that mean to you?
The scripture that says, you draw nigh to me, and I will draw nigh to you. What I see is a group of people, yes, they're fearful, but they're listening to what's happening. They're listening to what God has said, and they begin to draw themselves. And then when I was reading this, I'm thinking the same thing with Moses in the wilderness. He called the people, said, bring me this stuff, bring me these things. And they kept coming and kept coming and kept coming, because there was a spirit from God into the people that had them bring all that was necessary for the tabernacle.
Yep.
And they're doing the very same thing. Here, they showed themselves willing for the first time to do what they were supposed to have done in the beginning. And God said, there it is. And he began to bless that spirit and touch their hearts, touch their lives, and gave them a desire to fulfill the word of God.
You know, I think we don't often think about the fact that God influences people throughout the Bible.
Oh, yeah.
We know that he influenced Pharaoh, and we see it again here, that he influenced these people to do what they needed to do. But I think he waits till after he said, they mess up, and he said, Are you not paying attention? I told you to come back and build the temple. You decided not to do that and build your own house. And he sort of gives them this moment of discipline. And then he says, I'm with you. And he's saying, I'm going to help you now get this done. I'm going to give you the right spirit, the right attitude, the wisdom, the knowledge, and all of that. I'm going to influence you to be able to get this done, because I believe they were truly repentant. I really do. I think that's why he said, I'm here with you. I still love you. I still got you. I know that you haven't done right to this point, but I'm still here. You're still my people. I got you.
You asked why Joshua was included in this in the beginning. And I think it's because he's one of the leaders who listened to the Lord and answered the call. So that's what got him included in this.
Mm-hmm. It looks like a lesson, not just for the remnant, but for the leadership too. It's not just for the people, but for the leadership. There, I was reading one of the commentaries, and he was talking about the fact that the leaders themselves were not having the temple built. The people didn't build the temple because the leadership didn't say, we've got to build this temple. So their leaders were kind of falling down on the job. So the people were falling down on the job. So maybe, I think you could be dead on with that, John. The leadership needed to hear all of this and needed to be the ones in the front doing the thing. So here we go with Zerubbabel and Joshua. Yep, and building this, taking care of this remnant of people and having them to work on the house of the Lord. Now, verse 15, okay, in verse 1, okay, we saw it was the second year of Darius, 6th month, first day of the month, okay? Verse 15, the 24th day of the 6th month, the 24th day, in the second year of Darius the king. So we have the first day and then the 24th day. So all of this takes place within that period of time.
Right.
So this is quite a lot of time going on here. It's a little over 3 weeks in our time. That's enough time for crops to die, animals to die, all the things were going on. But now you see this mark here of this time that they begin to do the right thing, that they start doing the right thing, start moving in the right direction. I don't think I remember, and do you guys, anybody remember a scripture that kind of gives you that level of time where it marks the first time and marks another time like that? I can't remember another one in the Word. Anybody?
I think there is, but
I know there's some time marks in Daniel, and I want to say there's there's a couple in Ezekiel too, but I know there's one or two in Daniel, but I can't think of anything else that gives me 23 days. That's pretty remarkable.
Yeah.
And I mean, we know that the flood was 40 days, and we know all of these pieces of time, but we don't have the exact marking of the time. So we could name the year, and we can name the month, and all of that. So I think that's very, very cool. So let me read the rest of this to you from the Message. All right, I'm going to start at verse 8, just because that's the way it's kind of blocked. Then God said, here's what I want you to do. Climb into the hills and cut some timber. Bring it down, rebuild the temple. Do it just for me. Honor me. You've had great ambitions for yourselves, but nothing has come of it. The little you brought to my temple, I've blown away. There was nothing to it. And why? This is a message from God of the angel armies, remember. Because while you've run around, caught up with taking care of your own houses, my home is in ruins. That's why, because of your stinginess. And so I've given you a dry summer and a meager crop. I've matched your tight-fisted stinginess by decreeing a season of drought, drying up fields and hills, withering gardens and orchards, stunting vegetables and fruit. Nothing, not man or woman, not animal or crop, is going to thrive. Then the governor Zerubbabel, son of Shealtiel, and the high priest Joshua, son of Jehozadak, and all the people with them listened, really listened to the voice of their God. When God sent the prophet Haggai to them, they paid attention to him. In listening to Haggai, they honored God, just in the listening. Then Haggai, God's messenger, preached God's message to the people. I am with you, God's word. This is how God got Zerubbabel, Joshua, and all the people moving, got them working on the temple of God of the angel armies. This happened on the 24th day of the 6th month in the year of King Darius. Sometimes when I'm studying, I study multiple translations. And part of that is sometimes I don't quite get it in the King James, but like the ESV or the New American Standard will help me. But if I want a really quick kind of encapsulated view of what I'm reading, I'll read it in the Message. It gives me a very quick sort of, it's almost like a synopsis more than a word for word translation. You know what I mean? So I get a nice kind of overview. Now, some of the stuff in the Message I don't always not disagree with. I don't always agree with, but I don't always consider it to be the full explanation, but I do like the general overview that I get sometimes from the Message. All right, so let's go back. Anybody have any questions on anything that we have looked at or talked about? Okay, so I want to go back. I want to go to a timeline of the minor prophets. So we're going to share just for another moment. Okay, everybody see the screen? So can everybody see it?
Yep.
Okay, so here are the 12 prophets, okay? And then these are sort of the major prophets, the longer books. And then you have some of these other people that were around in that time. So we've already studied Jonah, and you see this timeline. And remember, now listen, y'all, I'm 50 years old, and I remember when I was a kid going, I don't understand why I have to go 750 BC is farther away than blah, blah, blah. I didn't understand that when you hit zero, in a timeline, it increased both ways until we learned the number line. It took me a long time to understand that. But we're looking at all of these different prophets, and we've already talked about Jonah. We're over here right now at Haggai. But I want you just to look at this and kind of get an overview of these overlapping things. See all this overlapping? Zechariah and Haggai here, but two totally different, books, but a lot of overlap. We also see that in the New Testament. When you're talking about the four Gospels, as Pastor says, you have all of these similar stories. You have all these repeats. So some of this we're going to see sort of a similar theme in some of these other books that we look at. So once we get through with Haggai next week, we'll go on to some of these others. And then we're going to take each one of these books and we're going to kind of go through them in the context of the timeline and discuss what was happening and try to put together this particular period of time from about 855 BC up until about 425. We're going to try to put that kind of into context when we get through studying the timeline of the minor prophets. Okay? That's what we're going to do. And that should be very interesting. And the goal for that is for us to literally recap everything we've studied and kind of understand the process of how everything was happening during this time. There's a lot of critical stuff that's gone on. There's a lot of stuff that's repeated where we see this overlap. In fact, there are references like to Isaiah in other books. Like when we studied Jonah, we saw references to other books. So we want to kind of pull all of that together as we get through the minor prophets. So that's how we're going to work it, okay? Once we finish, we'll go back through and review it all and do the timeline. All right, does anybody have any questions, comments, cries of outrage? All right, Pastor, do you have anything you'd like to share about any of this?
Good stuff. Good job here. I know I think you really hit the high points, good graphics sharing with us. So looking forward to continuing on with this.
Fabulous. So I cannot wait for the next chapter. Okay, so you may want to read a little ahead. Just not want to read that next chapter. It's not very long, but it's interesting. The other thing I want to give you, and I'm gonna just let me get over here and I'll drop a link into the chat, or let me just tell you how to find it. Go over to YouTube and type in Bible Project and then whatever book you want to get an overview on. Haggai, Zechariah, whatever. The Bible Project, if you've never seen any of these videos, they literally illustrate the whole book for you and break it down. And it's a very cool way to get an overview of what we're studying. Now, I'm not gonna, I mean, we could pull them up and watch them every single time. They're usually between 5 and 8 minutes long, but I just really enjoy getting an overview and visually seeing how it's broken down. So we're gonna try to do a little bit of that kind of feeling when we go through to do the timeline. So I'm working it out to do it kind of that way. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and stop recording unless anybody has anything else to share. Anybody? Okay, thanks guys for joining us.